Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I am Andy with Integrity Data Insights, and I help other companies with their reporting and analytics needs. And I'm super thrilled to have on my show today Ryan Buckingham. He is a director of business intelligence. Is that right, or business
Business
analytics?
analytics. And
So,
yep.
so thanks, Ryan, for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me and excited to be here.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, let's dive in. So Ryan and I knew each other from a while ago, and we've kind of kept in touch. We both worked at a big company, and Ryan's gone on to do some great things with managing a team, and with we're both kind of in the same space. But I love Ryan's insights and love to hear more about what you do. So maybe just tell us, kind of at a high level, whatever you can, like what's it like having an analytics team? Kind of what kind of things do you, what kind of people do you serve? What kind of questions do you help answer? Anything like that that gives a picture for what it's like.
Yeah, so I work for iMed Vision Care. We are the insurance division under EssilorLuxottica. So EssilorLuxottica is really the leader in vision, all things vision. So we comprise the former Luxottica Corporation, which was recently merged with the Essilor Corporation. So Luxottica is the worldwide leader in the production and distribution of glasses, eyeglasses. So that includes
Okay.
ophthalmic glasses as well as sunglasses. Essilor is basically the same, but for the lenses. So, it was a kind of a natural marriage of the two companies.
Right.
And then, people would recognize most of our brands. So we own Lens Crafters, Target Optical, Pearl Vision, Sunglass Hut. Our house brands and for glasses include Oakley, Ray-Ban,
Wow.
Persol, and some others. And then under license, we produce the vast majority of the designer brands that you would see if you were shopping for eyeglasses or sunglasses.
Right.
So by the time you get to the insurance part, right, it starts to sound a little bit more dry. But we are 80 million members strong and growing. So we serve a significant percentage of the population in the U.S. and are currently expanding internationally as well. And so in our role, I'd say most larger companies, many small and mid-sized companies offer a vision benefit to their members. So, or to their employees who are our members. So you think about, people have medical insurance, they have dental insurance, vision insurance is right there kind of in the same spirit of a benefit. And so people who get their annual eye exams, that's covered by us. People who get their glasses, they get an allowance for their frames, they get their lenses, they may wear contacts. So all of those types of things are included under our benefits.
Okay.
And so, we want to make sure that people are getting their eyes checked, right? I mean, that's it's the most important thing, for our business, is ensuring that people are actually going and getting their eye exam. You need a prescription to get your glasses. You want to make sure your prescription's up to date. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to know how many health issues could be encountered or detected even, by an optometrist doing a routine vision exam. So a lot of folks are maybe more reluctant to go to see their PCP for an annual checkup, but they need a new pair of glasses. They'll go take care of that, and they'll discover, they have diabetes, or they have hypertension, or they have high cholesterol, or any number of other things. So it's so it's great to be in a position to help the general public. And also the work is really interesting because insurance has a lot of data.
I can imagine.
We have claims, we have membership, we have provider network, we configure the benefits. And so all of those things involve high, the 3 V's of big data, or volume, variety, velocity. We have all the 3 V's in our data at iMed. So I
Yeah.
lead a central reporting and analytics function, and we serve kind of all of the functional areas in our business. So that makes it even more interesting still, because we touch all aspects of our business, all aspects of operations, finance, marketing, sales, and account management. So it's really interesting work. We do a ton of external reporting for our clients, for regulators, and other third parties. We do a lot of reporting and analytics projects in support of internal stakeholders who are, doing continuous improvement or just managing and monitoring their functions in the business. Just trying to do day-to-day things, respond to audits. You name it, we're usually involved with it. So it's always
Right. Wow.
interesting. Yeah, no day is ever the same.
Yeah, I love this because I like I said, sometimes on the show I have people that I don't I don't do the same thing with, but everything you said, I'm like lighting up because I
Yeah.
know that world really well and I'm still in it. So yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like you got customer, you got internal people, you got external people even you're relying on. Maybe talk a little bit about what kind of roles, you know, exist that you see, like what kind of team, what kind of data roles exist and what are those kind of responsibilities for those people?
Yeah, so thinking outside of IMED and just kind of broadly, I feel like the analytics space has evolved a lot in the last 10 years or so,
Mhm.
and is still continuing to evolve. I think back to the days when you and I worked together. I don't think the term data scientist existed.
No, I don't think
Um,
it did.
I think
Yeah.
it was coined somewhere around 2010 or 2012 to try to put a label on something that people were kind of starting to do as an evolution, but no one had a formal role or title for that. And at the time, it felt like companies were just looking for unicorns because they themselves didn't really understand what exactly they needed. I
Right.
remember in those early days, everyone was looking for PhDs from academia, statisticians, computer scientists. Um, in some cases, you're looking for folks from what they used to call operations research, which is kind of like a precursor to some business analytics, like higher end business analytics. But it was just a giant fog, and so
Yeah.
some companies just needed someone to come in and help them make charts, right? Some people had no understanding of what their data landscape looked like and where they wanted it to go, and they needed help with data warehousing. Some people were looking for your more traditional business intelligence, and then we were kind of at the modern dawn of predictive analytics and machine learning, right?
Right.
And so I'm amused on a daily basis to see how AI is referenced and treated, in the media, in casual conversations, because from my perspective, what we call AI today really isn't new, at
Mhm.
all. I mean, the hardware capabilities, that's different than it used to be. Yes, there are more complex algorithms, there are different methodologies to doing things, but computational statistics going all the way back, I mean, as far back as the 1940s, Alan Turing was at Bletchley Park in England cracking the Enigma code
Yeah.
of the
Right.
Nazis, right? And I encourage all the listeners, go out and watch the Imitation Game movie. It's probably
I
free on Netflix,
I
and
have
you'll
seen
see,
that. That is good.
yeah, and you see like the spinning dials and stuff, and like it was electromechanical in old fashioned housing with probably lots and lots of cloth covered wires, but it was conceptually doing a lot of the things that machine learning AI is doing today, which is using data to detect patterns, draw inferences, and in some cases make prescriptive recommendations about what to do next. So, it's been a very, very long, decades long evolution between, then and where we are today.
Yeah,
I
and you were
think,
saying, I think when we were talking earlier, kind of and I would totally agree with you. The lines have been blurred, right? Like when somebody
yeah.
says they're doing AI, you don't know if, they could be doing, all kinds of different things, and it makes it a little bit challenging to know kind of exactly what's going on because it's kind of all been put under that umbrella.
Oh, sure. Yeah. They could be doing a simple linear regression with two variables, or they could be doing neural networks, which, you can have a PhD and still be struggling to understand what your algorithm's doing. Right. So it runs the spectrum. And then, when we apply it to business or we apply it to industry, that spectrum is still there. And so you have companies who are at different spots in their in their journey or in their life cycle of acquiring, managing, and integrating data, which is a somewhat different question from once you have the data and you can access it, what are you doing with the data? And so what we have seen in the last decade or so is a tendency to move toward a team-based approach. And so a lot of organizations now split out what used to be that unicorn function of the data scientist and say, well, no, what I need here is I need a team of data engineers. They're going to build me a data pipeline because there's an extract, transform, and load or ETL function to get that data into the spot where maybe I have a data analyst who's doing routine reporting off of that data set, but that analyst shouldn't be the one, for multiple reasons, doing the transformations and extracting the data out of multiple source systems. But then you may have a different team who says, okay, well, we got the routine reporting down, but now we have to build out some cool interactive visualizations, right? And that's for a different audience that's using it for a different purpose. But then you may have another team who's focused on machine learning, and they may say, okay, well, we're going to be mining the data, looking for relationships between and among variables that can create some level of predictive value classification, trying to answer specific questions, or maybe we're not even trying to answer specific questions. We're just mining the data, looking for knowledge. And that's going to be yet another team. And then within those teams, there can be overlap. And so it really depends on what the company needs to do, what their objectives are. Right. And I think one of the mistakes that I observed, over the last decade, just casually talking to people about what their companies were doing or how they were structuring, was that strategic assessment of their environment wasn't always done or wasn't thoroughly done. And people kind of dived into just starting to hire people and giving them projects without understanding what objectives are we solving for? If we do it in this way, what trade-offs do we need to consider and try to work around? Where do we need to augment our resources, temporarily? And where do we need the knowledge and the expertise to remain within the business? A lot of those things were just kind of missed. And so a lot of companies today are, I think, still trying to work through the foundations. And I always say it's so critical to get the foundation right before you start trying to jump into other things, because you constantly create struggles for your teams and their stakeholders.
Yeah, because we were just talking about that. Kind of an example, high level. I get pulled into some of these projects, and sometimes it's like, hey, somebody gives me data from an extract where everything's flattened out, but it came probably from source systems that are very much the opposite, very much structured. And
Right.
then you kind of have to work, like you said, with your data engineering magic on that and try to make sense of it and try to structure it in the right way. But like ideally, you wouldn't do it that way. You go right to the source, or you think about it the right way. And then I loved your point, when you said, like some of these different roles, like data engineering, that skill's different than, data visualization, pulling up, drag and drop and making the charts and the filters and all that stuff's very different than like, hey, how should we structure this data set so that, it can serve all these reports and not maybe just this one-off one that, that the boss is asking for.
Well,
Um,
right. And what's funny is, when you look at the academic programs that have kind of sprung up everywhere. I mean, there are boot camps, there are bachelors and masters in all sorts of different things, and you see different terms and different curricula supporting that learning. And my observation, having been, which I can't believe I can now say old guard, like was doing this before it got trendy, before there was a lot of hype around it, before all these academic programs and professional training programs cropped up. But from an old guard perspective, I sometimes, not always, right, and I don't want to be critical of anybody, but I feel like it's similar to when my kids said, hey, I want to play basketball. And I said, all right, well, go out in the driveway and dribble. They don't want to dribble. So dribbling's boring. I want to shoot hoops because shooting hoops is fun. And so, what I have seen, again, not always, I don't paint with a broad brush, but I have seen so many instances where people go all the way through a program. They want to do AI. It's exciting. It's fun. I want to build algorithms. I want to make predictions. Yeah. I want to immediately add value to the business. And so a lot of these curricula in college courses and boot camps, they practice shooting, and they don't practice the dribbling, the fundamentals. And so when you take somebody who has, they've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on a very, very difficult regimen of study, and then they get thrown into a business or thrown into an industry where the data structure is not optimized. It's not clean. It's not integrated. It's not optimized for consumption of machine learning or AI models. Right. And you say, all right, you got to go all the way back to the beginning. You got to figure it out. You got to talk to people. You got to find the gaps. You have to create the engineering, the ETL, the data integration to solve for those gaps. Depending on the program someone's been through, by design, a lot of the exercises people get, and I know because I've been through some of these programs myself, by design, they give you a relatively clean data set. They might throw you through a few null fields or make some of the data screwed up, just to give you a little flavor of you got to cleanse your data, you got to validate your data. Right. But they won't give you the moon craters that people, encounter in real life.
Right. And those of us that have been through it have seen the crazy stuff.
I have never seen, I'm sure for people who want to be astronauts, there are lots and lots of courses on, how do you dock to the space station, right? That sounds exciting. But where's the part where you land on the moon and you get that moon rover and you got to drive over all of those moon craters and things without blowing up? There's probably, maybe they will have a course for that when they send folks back to the moon.
Right.
Everybody is forced to learn that on the job, and it becomes a source of frustration for those folks because there's no formal training for that when you join a company. It's just you have to just suffer through the gauntlet of it. But it's frustrating for stakeholders because they're like, hey, I brought in all these people. They're super knowledgeable. They've got all this experience, and they're not solving my problems quickly enough. Like, why are we still stuck 5 steps back?
Yeah.
Right. And that's where a lot of companies sometimes will bring in data analysts or machine learning engineers, and then they end up accidentally giving them data engineering work instead. Like, hey, we got to rebuild a pipeline or we got to cleanse our data. And that is something just from talking to so many different folks in this field. I see that trend repeatedly. And I think it goes back to, you have to assess your data landscape. You have to understand, what are my objectives? And then what does the current environment look like? What gaps do I need to close? And how do I close those gaps? And I think that all companies, big and small, would benefit from calling a timeout, even for a couple of days, and having those conversations. Like, well, what do we really want to try to achieve strategically with our data resources? Because if you watch enough TV, you've probably seen the Salesforce commercial with Matthew McConaughey in the Wild West, and he's
all right.
That's a good impression. It's like data is the new gold, right? And I'm thinking, yep. And Nvidia and some of the microchip companies, they're the picks and shovels of the new gold rush. But all right, he's right. Data's the new gold. There is so much value that sits locked up, right? And sometimes it's because the teams who can analyze the data can't get the right data out in a timely manner. And sometimes it's because resources just aren't aligned properly, or maybe there's not alignment between what stakeholders or companies are asking of their resources versus what they're able to deliver. And I think sometimes the cart gets put before the horse, and we say, all right, we're bringing you in and we're going to be prescriptive. You're going to do X, Y, and Z. Sometimes your data professionals need to come in and tell you, no, we're doing the assessment and we think that you should be doing X, Y, and Z.
Interesting. Yeah, because like just real life story, I was thinking of a very brief story, but like you and I both worked at the big company LexisNexis, and it's a very subscription-based business. And I remember one of the key things I was doing was trying to help the sales reps just get data on what's coming up for renewal. Something you would think would be, you wouldn't have to think about, something that they'd have solved. It was anything but that. And it's just because it's complex, right? There's a lot of things. Hey, this system captures the data this way, so sometimes it looks like it's expiring, but really it isn't, and you really have to go to the next record. So I mean, it's
oh sure, yeah, it's some of that's data structure, and then you throw in like platform migrations. I mean, how many times do people shift tools, and then you break the integration points of different systems in the back office, and you have to relearn a new data structure. I mean, that happens time and again. I think a lot of people have seen, even in mainstream media stories, when an airline says we're going to upgrade our reservation system, and then like all the flights in America end up canceled that day because something. Well, I mean, look at what just happened with the CrowdStrike thing in Microsoft. I mean, we just saw that happen. That wasn't an analytics problem, but it still illustrates how interconnected systems are. And at a micro level, that happens within a company. If you sunset a system, you have risks that you have to manage. If you don't sunset the system, so if you're a legacy airline or a bank, I'll pick on them because they're the ones I know have done this the most. They have some of the biggest, most complex legacy systems that were traditionally, even on COBOL going back decades.
Right.
And they've successively put modern skins on top of an antique infrastructure. And, maybe to the casual user who might get a peek at someone's screen, it looks like it's a modern system, but the reality is it's not.
Under the covers.
Yeah. It's like we put we put a lipstick on a pig. And there is a lot of risk if you try to migrate off of that, but there's also a lot of risk if you don't.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we just, people kick the can down the road until you get to the point where it's just not sustainable anymore.
Right. So we're jumping off a little bit here, but I want to dig in a little bit deeper on this. So kind of, like, I've talked about this, pretend you're, going to work for a company that you hadn't, that starting out, or what are, maybe what are kind of some of the things that the fundamentals that every company, that kind of should think about, to try to get it right. So that they can avoid some of this as much as possible.
Well, I'd say the number one thing from my perspective, fully acknowledging my bias, is bring your data people in at the very beginning. right? The people, because I think that one of the misconceptions that happens because our roles can be hard, can abstract for most users to understand.
Yeah, people don't get it.
People don't, well, and I, going back to LexisNexis, I had someone introduce me on a call one time as being from finance, and I didn't work in, I've never officially worked in finance. I've been adjacent to finance most of my career, but I never
Right.
officially worked. And I said, why did you think I worked in finance? And they said, well, because you do spreadsheets. And then I had a similar thing happen at a different time. Someone's introduced me as being in IT. And I said, I'm not in IT. Why did you, again, I've worked adjacent to IT for 20 plus years, but I've never officially been in IT. Why did you introduce me as an IT? Well, you write code. Like, okay, so, and I can understand where, a casual user might draw those inferences, but it shows how confusing our role can be. And the reason I point that out is because we do write code, but generally your analytics resources are not managing and maintaining source data. We're not making decisions about how the data is structured, which systems it's going in, if there are integration points, if there are batch updates or batch replication of data sets. We generally aren't making those decisions. We're not generally responsible for those things. And so from that standpoint, we are a consumer of the data just like anybody else. And so we have to be set up for success knowing that the data is going to be ready for consumption. What does that mean? It means that it's going to be in the right place at the right time. And we know timing is important. I mean, there are operational processes where you need real-time data. You can't wait for some overnight batch process to run. So you have to anticipate what are the needs in terms of place, people, time to get the data out, in what structure, so that we can do our job. And anytime some potential challenge or some issue that might prevent that from happening optimally is missed, then we end up having to go back and fill the gap with workarounds, with manual processes, with making either assumptions or asking stakeholders to accept some suboptimal aspect of our process, or some kind of a compromise, because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to get it done, right? So if you bring your data folks, the people who are consuming the data, in at the beginning, you can help miss some of those gaps, and it makes a big difference. It doesn't mean that every time we say, if you do X, Y, and Z, it's going to make my life easier, that when your BA or whoever is looking at the whole ecosystem is going to say, oh, well, Ryan said this is going to make his life easier, let's spend the extra $1 million. Like, no, I mean, but at least if you know that you're justifiably going to lose, that you now have time to prepare for, all right, how am I going to work around that? Get your stakeholders involved so they understand we're going to have to make some compromises.
So here's an example that I was thinking in my head while you're talking. Tell me if this kind of resonates. So, like you were saying, we're not responsible for kind of a lot of the source system. So typical company, right? They have an IT person or somebody that's responsible for bringing in their CRM, setting that up, figuring out the data attributes, all those different things. And then people like you and I, or teams, are the ones that have to take that data out and say, hey, give me all the people that have purchased this product or whatever. And then you kind of run into like, wait, maybe that product's miscoded in the CRM, or, that, we didn't have the budget to put it into the CRM this iteration, so it's off on a spreadsheet. Can you guys pull off that spreadsheet and merge it with the CRM data? So that's just kind of what I was going through from real.
That's
the essence of what you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. And then your example of let's use the spreadsheet to augment our source data, right? That is positioned as a temporary solution that just becomes the process. right? And it doesn't become the process intentionally. It becomes the process through benign neglect, right? And then we often have IT organizations all over the world. One of the first questions that you get asked by IT when you ask for investment is there currently a workaround? And a lot of times, if the workaround exists, you either don't get the investment or it gets descoped or deprioritized, and your workaround just continues to be the way.
Right.
And everybody's got to live with that. So I think it's always important to acknowledge when you're creating an interim solution that it as much as possible, we either want to avoid that or we want to make sure everyone is aligned that this is the time box for the solution, and then we're going to actually solve for it properly. I think the other piece of this, which is related to what you said, talking about, what folks are doing to enter things where it could be miscoded. That kind of is a segue into the data literacy topic that I always like to discuss in organizations, because I think that there are a lot of folks who don't realize how much responsibility they have for data integrity in a company, or they don't understand the full scope or intensity, severity of potential issues that could be caused by their work stream. So if you have somebody whose responsibilities include just entering data, keying in data, right? And by the way, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody's human, right? Hopefully input validation is a thing. It's usually not. Hopefully it is.
It happens.
But folks need to understand if you don't get the data in, it's that old adage of garbage in, garbage out, right? So incomplete data, inaccurate data can create massive headaches for the analytics and reporting teams, and it could create massive headaches for the decision makers or the audiences who are looking for the report or the analysis that's based on that. So if I'm doing a report or doing an analytics project and I've got a ton of null values, I'm frankly going to look like an idiot if I give you a report and my biggest category is like NA, like it right? And
we've all been there.
We've all been there, but the second you do it, if you show it to anybody else, they're going to question the entire thing.
Their first question is, "What the hell is NA?"
Question is, because because the way that I always explain it is the data reflects the business process, right? Or if you're in an industrial environment, the operational process or whatever it is. So if the report reflects the data and the data reflects the process, you have to make sure the process is buttoned up. You can't have a bunch of NAs. You can't have, I remember an example from many, many years ago. I was working on a territory design at LexisNexis in sales ops function. And I had, and I loved those kinds of projects, but I had all these addresses for customers that were listed in Boston, Nebraska. And for the life of me, I couldn't find a Boston, Nebraska. I knew from looking at some of the fairly well-known companies that they were definitely in Boston, Massachusetts.
Right.
And I found the person to talk to, and I said, "Hey, why are these in Boston, Nebraska?" And they said, "Oh, that's New England. NE is New England."
Oh.
And it's like, okay, New England Patriots, like,
interesting.
Maybe I can sort of understand, but
Oh, wow.
I couldn't show anybody else that I had some Boston, Nebraska. So I went back and fixed the data from NE to MA, and now they're in Boston, Mass.
That's a great example.
Those were like 5 records out of 700,000 or something, and it's like so you can imagine how long that cleansing took, and everybody who's waiting for the output of that process from me wonders, what in the heck is taking me so long? Why is it taking so
Right.
long?
Yeah. Shouldn't this be simple? What is this guy doing
Right.
over there?
Right. And
Yeah.
it's that meme from the internet, select star from pristine table doesn't exist. Right. There is no pristine table. And I think that the time that we spend wrangling data, as I like to tell my team, doing the gymnastics, jumping through flaming hoops, it always slows things down. It makes it hard to commit to turnaround times. It makes it hard to commit to the accuracy and completeness of data when you're dealing with data integrity challenges. And you're always going to have them, but anything you can do in your business processes up front through training, through input validation, through desk level procedures to try to minimize that. And also, to an extent, help people understand what happens when other people are eating their cooking, right? Because a lot of people don't eat what they cook, and that's by design. But somebody may say, "Oh yeah, I always leave that field blank. I didn't know it was important."
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then someone else is, basically, taking
Relying
pills
on it.
because they're so depressed that every time they get this data feed, it's just like full of all these null values they have to figure out. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
helping people understand where they fit into the broader ecosystem is really critical. And I think sometimes that gets missed.
That's a great point. Yeah, I'm kind of in the throes of some data quality work right now, and it's amazing what happens. You got emails and phone fields and all kinds of
Mhm.
stuff. So thanks for sharing those insights. I want to jump to something that you were going to talk us through, kind of the Gartner visual on the analytics continuum.
Oh,
I think
sure.
this is super helpful. This is really cool. And just to kind of set this up, I mean, I think every company, every business is kind of in different stages, right? Of of the process. Some of them are just starting out. Some of them are at the very end of it, doing crazy prescriptive things with their data. But
Mhm.
so yeah, this chart that Ryan has is really great at kind of walking through kind of those different stages. So yeah, let me know whenever you get that. I'll put it up
Yeah,
on
I
the
can.
screen.
Yeah, I'll try to share my screen here, and
But
we'll
I
see.
love this because it kind of makes you think through kind of the journey that everybody's on, and just kind of the different um, the different and thinking kind of strategic about it. I think that's what I really like Ryan's point of view is I think he's really thinking about it the right way and trying to get his company to you know trying to here we go.
All right, how's that?
It's
How's that looking here? I'm going to zoom in
yeah,
on that.
yeah, that's great.
There
So
we
yeah, walk
go.
us through what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so this is the Gartner analytics continuum, and I give Gartner. I believe this particular one may have come from IMA, the Institute of Management Accountants, of which I'm a member. But I really, really like this view when we're thinking about data and analytics strategy, because every organization in its reporting analytics lifecycle kind of has to go through this overall continuum, right? It's a spectrum, and it starts at the very bottom here with standard reports. And so what you see
Okay.
is, on your y-axis, as you progress along the continuum, you increase your competitive advantage. On the x-axis, as you progress through the continuum, you increase the value that you give back to the business. So we, start with standard reporting, right? This would be, I would say, recurring reports on KPIs or things that certain decision makers need to know. A lot of times these are scheduled. You build them, you validate them, you schedule them. The audiences who need to get them have access to them, and they review them. They might make decisions based off of them, but generally, you don't have to really touch them unless there's maintenance or enhancements over time. And
Right.
that's typically answering the question, what happened? Then when you get that part stabilized, right? And I want to emphasize that the best case scenario is that you stabilize in one stage before you move to the next.
Right.
If you're kind of unstable in your reporting, and then you start trying to get into like your alerts or prescriptive analytics or predictive analytics, that becomes problematic because people are asking you to do more sophisticated things that imply that you're foundationally stronger and more stable than you are. And it starts to create some dysfunction in your reporting and analytics space if you're trying to do the work up here and managing a ton of noise and disruption back here.
Yeah, one just real quick thing, just to jump in there. The one of my clients, he explained kind of some of the work I was doing, the foundational work, as he was kind of saying at this level, it's kind of like when you're building a structure and they're pouring that concrete and they're smoothing it out and making it, super smooth. And some people won't even ever see that part, but that's like critical for the rest of what you're doing. So just want to jump in with that quick.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, it's all foundational, and it builds, each stage builds upon the prior stage. So if you get your standard reporting right, then, you get into your ad hoc and your query drill down, where you start now being able to dive in a little bit more. This is where you take those standard reports and you create variations that are more custom or more reactive, right? Just trying to get a little bit more granular in the details of what you're seeing. And then if you can get that stable and you build out alerts, it's like, now I can put some parameters around this, and I can say, all right, for this particular measure, when I exceed this threshold, or maybe anytime this event occurs, or I see this particular set of conditions is met 3 times in the span of X, I send an alert to somebody, and it's saying, make sure you take a look. There's something is happening.
Yeah, and
right?
like
It might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of the major analytics platforms are, have functions for this now too. So yeah, that's really cool.
And in this kind of burgundy area here, this is what I would say falls under the traditional realm of business intelligence.
Okay.
So and you still see business intelligence called out with distinction at times. My observation has been that business intelligence is starting to get swallowed up into the ambiguity of just analytics, reporting, and so sometimes you see it called out, sometimes you don't. I would suspect that organizations who still make the distinction for business analytics have traditional, structured databases, and they have clearly defined use cases in these areas.
Okay.
And so they're going to be the ones to say, hey, we already have structured data. It's in Oracle, it's in Teradata, it's in a SQL server, and we need people to build
my language.
Yep. Help us with query drill down, build alerts, those kinds of things. Then you start moving into the green, which is, if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have said just machine learning, full stop. Right. Because ChatGPT got popular, and now in the lexicon of the everyday user, AI is a thing, right? Everyone is more emphasizing the bigger umbrella of artificial intelligence in this area. But to me, it's often a distinction without a difference, and it actually confuses people when we try to talk about AI versus ML. And technically, machine learning is a subset of AI. These types of things could be achieved through, that whole family of algorithmic, whether it's basic computational statistics like linear logistic regression, could be more traditional machine learning algorithms like decision trees or, random decision forests, and you can bootstrap samples and you can boost them. And then you get into like neural networks and your large language models and computer vision, where we're trying to look at a picture and say, yes, I'm pretty sure that is a dog and not a firefighter, right? So it's like, and there are really cool use cases for all of these things. But what it comes down to, I think, is what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to be too cynical, but I think there are a lot of organizations who are doing AI for the sake of doing AI, because there's always this like there's always a contemporary panacea for everything that ails the organization. And currently AI is that panacea. Well, if we apply AI to X, Y, and Z, it's going to solve all of our problems.
Did you
Wow.
see, I'll have to put this in the comments, but there was this hilarious thing somebody posted. I still laugh at it every time, but it's this picture of like from, Michael Jackson in his prime, pops out of the stage, and it, the headline, or it says, what leadership thinks is gonna, what leadership thinks the company will think when they bring AI into the company. It's all these fans going crazy, feigning,
Yeah.
and like, but it's the perfect. I'll put it down in the comments. It's a good laugh and
that's
very
funny.
true.
And I don't want to get any hate mail from anyone who's watching this. I'm a huge fan of AI methodologies. I think there are a lot of great use cases for them. Every company should be dipping its toes into this now if they're not already into it, because if you're not making investments and building momentum, you're going to fall behind. I still stand by what I said, that if you don't have the foundation, if you don't have your reporting, your drill down, your alerts, if you don't have your data structures set up properly as a prerequisite to doing the work, the models themselves are going to be contending with noise, with incompleteness, with inaccuracy, and that's not really going to be doing anyone any favors, especially when a lot of machine learning solutions can tend to be more black box in nature. So when you think about the complexity of what a mathematical model is doing, it's easy to say, okay, if I have a linear regression that has two variables, I can plot that on a chart. I can see what it's doing. As soon as you start getting into some of these ML models, especially with high dimensionality, you quickly lose interpretability. The machine is doing things the right way mathematically, but human beings just can't understand exactly what it did. A lot of the time we may not care.
Right.
As long as it's useful, we'll be okay with the black box. But if you have to pick apart data integrity issues, and you have a black box, that's a different scenario. So yeah, you get into like the prescriptive, forecasting, predictive, and optimization. I mean, this is where you can start unlocking previously unrealized insight from your data. This is where you can automate decision making, right? And a great example is in the industrial space. A lot of the companies who are building industrial machines or robotics or, like industrial automation, somebody like a Honeywell, for example.
Okay.
All right. In an industrial environment, you may have all these really, really expensive machines. They can start self-monitoring their performance with sensors and things. And then those sensors create the data of those measurements, run it through a predictive model that will make a prediction about whether a particular component is about to fail, can get ahead of that, is integrated with, some kind of an ERP system. It can order the part, schedule the technician, get it all aligned, and that machine can be scheduled for downtime, and you can optimize your operation. That's something that wasn't possible 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're saying there's a guy, I'll give a shout out, Jeff Winters. He has a big following on LinkedIn, but he's really huge in this space. I don't know if it's exactly just under that umbrella, but Industry 4.0. But he has a ton of content out there. If you're interested, he's a really good, he just explains it really well, and really cool stuff going on. It's amazing. One thing I want to get into real quick, about just sharing my experience with AI. So recently I played around with using, I mostly Power BI and Tableau are the two tools I know the best data visualization wise. So I played around recently with using Microsoft's Copilot within Power BI, and I released a video on it. But it was pretty amazing what it could do. I think it's been around, a little bit over a year or more, but I think what they
Mhm.
released I think with this specific release was the ability to kind of query against your own data set.
Mhm.
But just couple takeaways I had. I'd love to get your thoughts if you've explored it, but I view it as like a couple things. One, I think you got to be careful because I think with the AI, sometimes it can cover for some of the fact that you don't have things as good as you should have had it because it can, like, hey, what were my sales? And it can kind of, obviously it's not going to be perfect, but it can kind of sometimes, maybe you don't have the field labeled quite correctly, but it knows enough to figure it out. So it can kind of sometimes
Mhm.
cover for some of the, problems you have in the data model. So that was one takeaway to, it's hard to know. Is it a good thing that it can kind of work around some of the stuff, or is it, is it enabling bad behavior? I don't know. But then the second thing, it was pretty eye-opening to me was like, I was asking it questions like, I had a sample, the AdventureWorks kind of data, and I was pinging it, and I would say, what was the top product that was returned? And it would sit there, and it wasn't the fastest thing. It would crunch, and then it would come back and say, oh, water bottles, 30 ounce were the most returned. But I guess just some thoughts are, I feel like that kind of technology is going to change the expectations of people in the industry because, and we're just at the start of it, but going
Mhm.
forward, something that, look, cut back to your point before, what's taking so long, or why is this, now with AI, some of these things, I was amazed. There was a couple of things I typed in and it seriously generated a whole dashboard, something that probably would have taken me, hours. Even if you're good, it still takes time to drag and drop and to do all the connections. So like, I
Mhm.
think the bar is going to be raised on, you know, and it's going to kind of in a way put pressure on people in our kind of industry to produce things more efficiently because, hey, it used to take you a week to do that dashboard, but now I can, now with AI you can, and it's, yeah, anyways, I'm sharing some thoughts with that in this space. And this isn't, I haven't gotten into using it for kind of the prescriptive elements and that kind of thing, but just another side of it is kind of using it to kind of help enable the people that are, responsible for, like, you and I and our, the people that you work with, trying to, so I see that as a big shift that's coming, but love your thoughts
Mhm.
on that if you have any.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd say for starters, I mean, Copilot is still being rolled out. I think that most folks' understanding of AI is really biased toward chatbots. Which is fine. I think that chatbots represent a ton of opportunity um, in internal use cases for companies. They're already pervasive in customer service. I mean, how many apps or websites do you go on and they've got a name for their chatbot, and you can, ask a question, you can file a complaint, you can do all sorts of different things. But
Right.
internally, a lot of companies don't really have that yet. We field in my functional area a lot of ad hoc requests where somebody just wants to answer to a question. I would love to see in a number of years that we have some kind of a chatbot functionality that leverages our data, and someone can ask a question. Hey, I want to know, for this client or this industry, tell me this, and it would be able to go crunch that and give them
Right.
the answer. Right? It's more efficient for them, it's more efficient for us. We can redeploy resources toward other things. But what it also demonstrates is there's going to be a tendency toward moving the data into solutions in a production environment, which is a bit different than what a lot of companies are doing today. I mean, there's very little that we're doing right now where if someone were asking a particular question, that it's in a production environment that's fully integrated into an online product or a work stream that people are engaging with. That requires a different project plan, different set of folks, right, to put code into production. It also, I think, creates this weird dichotomy where on the one hand, I think AI is going to reduce some of the high code expectations for folks in our field, because
Right.
AI can write fairly complex code to do basic things today. I would caution people against just copying and pasting because it messes things up, but it can be a starting point, and it foreshadows where as we can probably accelerate a shift from high code to low code solutions, which in turn enables more people in the organization to have data engaged or data driven types of roles or responsibilities.
Right.
At the same time, if you have all of these insights and you have these AI driven processes that you want to embed into production, now you have to have folks who can do that. And that's a different skill set altogether, where you can't fully get away from the high code, because someone can say, well, I built this thing in Python and we could toss it into a production process. There's no such thing as tossing. We don't toss anything anywhere, right? And most of the things that my shop builds is in R, and nobody's putting R into production, right? So code has to be rewritten in a different language on a different platform. You need Java developers to do X, Y, and Z. And so it changes the game for a lot of folks and how people interact with each other. So I'm very optimistic about the future, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things continue to evolve. And I hope that everybody, all companies, all organizations, just keep their eyes open for opportunities.
Yeah, great. Well, one more thing I really want to get to, Ryan. I know we're kind of almost at time here, but one of the things I really want to, we had a super interesting talk the other day about kind of your thoughts on like dashboards versus reports.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I thought it was a really interesting thing that you brought up, because as both of us, deal with dashboards and stuff quite a bit. Maybe share your thoughts on that, or I think it's a unique perspective. So I think you tend to ask that question on interviews with people and stuff, you said, right? So
you gave it away. So now if anyone's interviewing with me in the future, you're already going to know the answer, but that's okay. I think people who took the time to watch this should be rewarded. So that's yeah, we were talking about dashboards, and I think we were talking about how there was a Tableau implementation at LexisNexis when we were there, and kind of how Tableau at the time was marketing that solution. And I think my thoughts have always been that I think it's a little bit backwards to say we're building visualization so that people can do drill down analysis. I mean, that's really the crux of it. So when you think about that continuum that I was showing, and drill down is part of a traditional BI function, right? I don't believe that a dashboard is the appropriate tool to do that, and the audience for the dashboard is the appropriate person to be doing that work. So the example I like to use, I'm driving a car down a highway. We'll say I'm going 65 miles an hour so I don't get in trouble, but I'm going 65 and I got over 2,000 pounds of metal.
Right.
Yeah. I should have my eyes on the road, and I really only need the car to interrupt me if there's something important that I need to know. My engine is overheating. My traction control has triggered because I've gone into a skid, or something like that. I don't want to sit and review on the screen all the data, all the measurements from the anti-lock brakes and the thermostat and all that stuff. I just want something to flash on the screen and bing, bing, bing if I need to pay attention. Right. And in my mind, that's what dashboarding really is. We call it a dashboard because I'm a leader. My business, I'm driving my car down the highway, and I just need to know, is there something that requires my attention? Because I am a very busy person. I have a lot to do. If I have a whole bunch of data and I want to detect, does something require my attention? I can do that with math. If I've exceeded a threshold, I can do that with math. If I need to infer the threshold using outlier detection methodologies, that is math. If I want the report to have conditional formatting to say red, yellow, green, or whatever's appropriate for visual impairment, I can do those things. Even if you get into like a dashboard where someone's looking at a column chart and it says, oh, this is the tallest bar in the column chart. I wonder what's comprising that really tall bar. And I click it and I drill down. Now I see some more bar and I click again. I don't know that that's the best use of an executive's time to be like doing a sophisticated version of guess and check through the chart, which is really what it is. So I like to use data visualization, not to necessarily explore the data. I've already explored the data, and now I'm going to tell a compelling story using the real estate and the formatting options available to me on the screen. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have folks in functions who can't explore data and gain some knowledge, but again, if machine learning is kind of the way the wind is blowing to detect patterns and relationships in the data, doing it with your eyeballs on a chart, to me, doesn't make as much sense. And it just feels like it's like a haphazard way of filling a role that could be done, in a more sophisticated manner. And again, going back to outlier detection and thresholds and conditional formats, and like that's to me is the way that we build a dashboard, and we center it around KPIs, because I also don't want a dashboard that covers 70 things. That's not a dashboard. I mean, your car is limited. Your screen is limited. What are the 5 things that are vital to the health of my operation that I need to track? And so I'm a little bit more reductionist when it comes to
that's great.
how it's built. And I think, too, it forces you to ask the hard questions, the strategic questions about, why am I even building this? What am I trying to do? Because if you build a dashboard that includes the kitchen sink, that implies to me that somewhere along the way, someone didn't actually know what they wanted, so they asked for everything.
Yeah, that's great, because I'm totally on board with that. I haven't released it, but I've been messing around with a product called the Report Planner, because I feel like people don't they don't think through it. What do I even want this thing for? What is somebody supposed to do with it when they get it? How often should they look at it? Those kind of things. And then I think if you ask those questions, the reports become a lot more, or dashboards, I should say, become a lot more meaningful. But yeah, I love those thoughts.
There is a place for reports, by the way. I'm not saying there's not. It's just we need to make the distinction, because it has a completely different philosophy around how you develop it. And then the last thing I'll say, because I know we're close to time here, is when we're building reports, I would just like to say that if somebody wants the data so that they can export it into Excel, you might be misusing your data resources.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Like, if we go to the trouble of figuring out the whole, and this is where we get into companies and folks asking their people to be just data engineers without realizing it. If the issue is just sourcing the data, that's one thing. We can acknowledge that. But it's like, if I want to do a pivot table, well, if I've gone 90% of the way sourcing the data, I can create a summary table in any number of tools. I can create a summary view that spits out on demand or on a schedule. If you want to poke around with the data and re-pivot, then that begs the question, are we pulling in the right dimensions? Are we using the right platform for you to interact with the data? Have you sat down and really understood what are you trying to accomplish with this project? Because to me, it's a red flag if someone says, I just want to be able to mess around with the data myself, but I just don't know how to pull it. Right.
Well, those are great thoughts. I always enjoy talking to you, Ryan. You always have a great insights into what it's like working with data every day. And what's the best way to people to get a hold of you if people want to learn more about you or what you do?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn, so people can find my profile and message me there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan. I really appreciate you taking the time, and best wishes. And thanks so much. Keep fighting the good fight with the data. I love it. So
I'll tell you what, we want people to get their eye exams. We want them to buy their glasses, and I want my internal stakeholders to be well taken care of as well. So we're gonna keep fighting the good fight, and you do the same for your clients, Andy. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.